Wow, The Shrink Next Door is honestly absolutely incredible. It's really easy to say how on earth did this happen to the Marty character, but actually you can really see through this series that it could happen to anyone, as the Ike character was just super manipulative and just took advantage of this character while he was at his lowest, and just the craziness that happens in this series is just truly unbelievable. But like I said, just incredibly well made, and I just absolutely love this series, and I just cannot wait to break it down for you in this Apple TV series review. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Lifestyle Critic. I hope you're having a brilliant day. So in this video, we are going to be reviewing Apple TV series The Shrink Next Door, which is based on the incredibly popular podcast series of the same name. And this is a really psychological thriller, dark comedy drama series that really does focus on a really manipulative therapist who absolutely abused his powers and really manipulated his clients out of millions of dollars and really just took over his life. This series was just incredibly fascinating and really disturbing as well. And it was a really slow burn series that just got crazier and crazier and more sinister and sinister as well as the episodes were progressing. And I just think as a structure, it was really well made, as the first 4 episodes really did focus gradually on a particular period of time in which Ike was meeting Marty, and you got to see their relationship growing, and slowly but surely you could see the obsession that Ike was having over Marty's money and how he was taking over his life and really isolating him from everybody around him. But in the final 4 episodes, you could really see how quickly time was just running away from Marty, and you could just really feel that he didn't really know what on earth was going on, and you could really empathize with this as he just was out of control and Ike was just completely destroying him. A little bit like Get Out, actually, in terms of the character just going into the sunken place and is just becoming a shell of his former self. And it was just so heartbreaking seeing how Ike was just totally destroying the Marty character. But what I absolutely loved by the end of this series is that Marty was really able to find his voice and was then able to break out of this and finally was able to not only stand up for Ike, but was able to really recognize all of the destruction that Ike has done to him, both mentally and financially and physically as well. This was just absolutely heartbreaking to see the Marty character go through all of this traumatic stuff. And in the final few moments of this series as well, you can really see that the Ike character doesn't even have any remorse and really is always just able to twist everything back onto Marty and is like, you know, are you going to apologize to me? Absolutely mind-blowing stuff. And you also find out that this was not the only person that Ike was totally being really manipulative towards, as he was telling a lot of his clients that they actually should end their relationships with their family members. And a lot of his clients actually left him millions of dollars as well in their wills for the Ike person. So it's just absolutely crazy, the total abuse of power that Ike was doing, again, not only to Marty, but to a lot of his patients as well. I also thought it was really interesting how at first, actually, you think that Ike is a really great therapist, as he is really helping Marty overcome a lot of his challenges, and you yourself are able to really see the breakthroughs that Marty is having and all of the self-confidence that he is growing. But then you also get to see the dependence that Marty is having with the Ike character. And I just think all of the people around him, I thought it was really fascinating, as they were able to see that Ike is really manipulating Marty, but Marty wasn't able to see it himself, which is actually really true for victims of abuse, in terms of they really can't see certain things that maybe other people can see. And when other people are trying to help them and guide them, they react really badly to this, which you really got to see with the Mariam person, as he was really isolating and leaving Mariam stranded when she was trying so hard to tell him about Ike's really dark and sinister advice. So because he was in so deep by that point, he just couldn't really see it. But actually, you could see bits of this happening right in the beginning when all of his friends and family members were trying to warn him, but he just wasn't able to see this. So that was really interesting as well in terms of Ike's wife's character, as she was complicit to all of the craziness that Ike was doing. And she also was trying to warn Ike, but Ike was just so in deep as well with all of this abuse. I think all of the people around him and all of the different characters based on real life events were really fascinating. And on that point, just the relationship between a patient and a therapist, I think, is really interesting as well, as obviously a patient just tells a therapist everything, and so a therapist has access and knowledge to a patient, so actually that duty of care is quite high. But obviously Ike was just abusing this and really manipulating it, and he kind of got really drunk with all of the money potential and the financial abuse that he was able to exert on the Marty character, which just got more and more and more crazy. The first time in which he did it, obviously at the auction event, even led to Marty almost dying and having a heart attack. And then after that, Ike just didn't have any restraint. And even from that event, he was even able to claim to everybody around him that actually this is his money. He is the person that paid for this really expensive gala, and even got everyone to think that the house in the Hamptons was his. And this was the thing that I thought was really, really heartbreaking and really, really dark as well. Whereas obviously it's all Marty's property, but everybody was thinking that Marty is just the groundskeeper that just happens to live with Ike. So it was just a total flip, and just the facade and the picture that Ike was able to create, not only for his family, but also for everybody around him and the perception of everybody else. Literally mind-blowing. Very similarly to Netflix's recent release Inventing Anna, which also really shows that there are certain people that are true sociopaths, and they are just not born with an ability to feel any empathy or guilt or remorse for their victims, and they really do identify very vulnerable people and then just really manipulate all of the trust and the dependency with the other person, with this person. I just think it's really, really fascinating. And then on top of that, they sometimes try to play the victim. So for example, the Ike character really was gaslighting Marty and really was trying to play the victim in a number of different scenarios. So for example, he was like, oh, well, maybe I'm not that great of a therapist then. I was trying to walk out of their relationship as well. And of course, Marty is just so dependent on Ike that Ike was able to really manipulate him in a really dark and sinister way. He was able to indirectly convince him to cut his family tree, which just held so much sentimental value, which was just so heartbreaking, and it was just so chaotic and really, really dark, actually, the environment that Ike was creating between these two characters. And I feel like a lot of this series was a lot of these two characters just kind of vocalizing all of their different thoughts and opinions and all of the manipulations. So I feel like both Paul Rudd and Will Farrell just need to win so many awards because their portrayals were just absolutely brilliant. And like I said before, it was just really crazy, all of the parties that Ike was then throwing in the Hamptons. And he also convinced Marty to buy the expensive property next door, which also the real estate wasn't advising as it had a lot of issues with it, which definitely did carry on across this series. But nonetheless, not only did he have the property completely transformed and was throwing all of these extravagant parties, which a lot of people have now come forward to say, you know, those parties were absolutely unbelievable. So a lot of money was being spent. And on that point as well, I thought it was really, really sad when Marty was trying to explain to his partner Hannah at the auction that, you know, Ike is the brains behind everything and he is just the bank. So it really does show it is a very destructive relationship. And everybody at the party just kind of viewed him as the groundskeeper and the cook, and just never really gave him the value that he deserves, because obviously Ike has completely crushed him. And I thought Catherine Hahn's Phyllis character just really did describe this perfectly when she came back in the final episode and just said to Marty, oh God, what on earth has he done to you? As he has just made him a shell of his former self. Like I said, very, very similar to Get Out, as he would just completely sent this character to the sunken place and just completely took over his life. The picture for the podcast is a hand just controlling someone, and I just feel like that is just the perfect depiction of this scenario. And the Ike character is just super, super unlikable, whereas the Marty character is just very, very likable. And I just feel like the character representation by both of these actors was just so brilliant. They do try to explain why Ike is doing this in terms of having a very difficult relationship with his father, and is just expressing this and trying to achieve things that would make his father proud. But obviously he's going about this in a very, very dark way. As like I said, he is just taking over Marty's life, and it's just really, really sad as he is just robbing Marty of all of these fun potential experiences that he could have had over those 27 years if he had the ability to have a normal life. So for example, he could have had a really good relationship with Phyllis. He could have experienced all of the things that Phyllis was saying happened to her over those 27 years. He could have maybe had romance for himself. Although it's so, so crazy, all of the happiness that he had robbed from him whilst he was still telling Marty that, you know, you really need me, I was there to help you, over those couple of years right at the end of this series. So it really was really, really dark in the way in which this was such a destructive and codependent relationship. Talking about imagery, I absolutely loved the opening sequence to every single episode, how you have all of these vines and plants slowly suffocating the main core item of the day. So for example, whether it's photo frames, whether it's a typewriter, whether it's an inflatable, I absolutely loved all of the imagery that they were using in this series. And on the typewriter point, absolutely ludicrous how the Ike character was just using Marty to just type out all of his books. And by the end of this series, you could see it was pages and pages and pages. So he would wake Marty up super, super early just to use his body to be the typewriter, whilst he is playing golf and is just thinking about what he wants to write in this novel. And I feel like the analogy and the common phrase of, you know, you give someone an inch and they take a mile was just used to absolutely extreme levels by the Ike character in this series. By the end of the run, you really got to see that Ike never really cared about Marty. He was only ever using him and was just making Marty think that they have got a real true friendship, which really was demonstrated when he didn't even bother visiting him while Marty was in hospital having an operation. So he totally brainwashed the Marty character, and I just feel like this really could happen to anyone. I mean, of course, this is really extreme lengths, but just the abuse, the manipulation, the dependency, I just feel like this series really highlights the importance of really identifying and seeing red flags. And when you do see them, just absolutely run away, because there is absolute danger if you do continue down a negative path, as narcissists can come across as being really appealing and really glowy, shiny people, and they can suck you through their really charming personalities. And especially if somebody is currently having low self-esteem, low confidence, low trust, and is in a difficult place with relationships, then kind of these dangerous people can seem really appealing, as not only are they exactly the type of person that they want to become, but also they can give some advice that can actually really help a person. But also, like I said, with this series, you can really see that the long-term consequences of this can be incredibly destructive, especially when there is so much dependence on that person for a person's survival, just incredibly toxic. And like I said before, I absolutely love the structure of this series. Like I said, in terms of the first phase of the episodes, just really focusing on how these two people got into this really toxic relationship and how you can really see it happening bit by bit, really slow burn wise. But then the final few episodes were just racing through the rest of the 27 years, and you can really see how Marty just completely lost sight of everything and just became the cook for Ike, and just became his bank, and was just funding the life for Ike to kind of prosper and prosper and prosper and just network, and was just able to really have a really successful practice. Whereas Marty's life just got worse and worse. And I have to say, the cast of this series were just absolutely phenomenal. Paul Rudd was just so brilliant as the Ike character. I absolutely loved all of the little gestures that he was even doing against the Marty character. So for example, whenever he would put his hand on his shoulder, he really would feel like he is in a place of authority, and is then able to control the Marty character, and is able to get Marty to kind of have a lot of emotions and positive feelings through touch, and therefore was able to manipulate him and to get him to do whatever he wants him to do. Paul Rudd was also so phenomenal in his portrayal, and not only how much he was convincing himself, how much he was convincing Marty, as well as just convincing everybody around him that actually his actions aren't as bad as they really are. And also, I loved the sequence at the bar mitzvah where Marty is just so confused and really isn't enjoying his bar mitzvah, versus how much Paul Rudd's character is just enjoying it to no end. Ike is just absolutely loving it in this sequence, and I just think Paul Rudd just did such a brilliant job in really bringing this character to life. And also, the way in which he does his therapy sessions across a table over the traditional way that therapists do it was just absolutely ridiculous. And very similarly, Will Ferrell was just phenomenal as the Marty character. Like I said, you really do feel like your heart is going to bleed for this character, as like I said, he is just so likable. And even just the way in which he only really sees the fishes as his friends, he's kind of naming them, and he's so disconnected from society, as Ike has just made him feel like that, and Ike has just made himself to be the only center of attention with everybody in their world. So I just feel like Will Ferrell was just so brilliant. And then we have Kathryn Hahn, who was just truly sensational as the Phyllis character, literally a woman that just wants to bang her head against the wall, as she is just able to see Marty just totally destroying himself, and also being able to see how Ike is just totally taking Marty away from her. And then you really do miss her as the episodes then progress, and it was just so brilliant having her return in the final episode and really give Marty the strength that he needs. And then it was really nice that they did actually in real life get to continue their relationship, even though they were estranged and apart for those 27 years. And what's really, really fascinating in real life as well is that they were only one block away from each other over those 27 years in New York City, yet they never really were able to have a relationship, which was really, really heartbreaking. And I just have to say, The Shrink Next Door was just absolutely brilliant. I just love the lens that it puts on a therapist relationship with a client and a patient, and just the importance and the trust that a therapist has from their patient. I just think is really, really fascinating. But also, taking a step back, you can actually see that this can happen to a lot of different people, not only in a therapist-patient scenario, but also in other relationships as well. And so I just feel like this series is just such an important lesson for a lot of people to take. And so for all of those reasons, I have to give The Shrink Next Door a massive 8 out of 10. and I would love to hear what you thought of this series, so please let me know in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.